Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving into Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Ever wonder why we disagree so fiercely? Especially when it comes to things like politics and religion.
Yeah.
This book gives us a fascinating peek behind the curtain.
It really does. Prepare to have your assumptions challenged.
Yeah.
Haidt argues that our moral judgments, well, they aren't always as logical as we like to think.
It's not just about cold, hard facts. What else is going on?
Haidt suggests we're often driven by deep-seated intuitions. You know, our gut feelings, which come first. Reasoning, he says, often comes later. Acting more like a press secretary for our emotions.
That's a pretty radical idea. Can you give us an example of how this works?
Sure. Remember the story of Julie and Mark, the adult siblings who decide to have a consensual, safe, and secret sexual relationship?
Okay.
Most people have a strong negative reaction to this, but when pressed to justify it purely on rational grounds, it gets tricky.
Exactly. I remember struggling with that one myself. What's Haidt's point here?
It illustrates what he calls moral dumbfounding. We're left speechless, feeling something is wrong, but struggling to articulate exactly why. It highlights how powerful these underlying intuitions are.
Okay. So it's not all about logic and reason, but are these gut feelings just random? Or is there some kind of system to them?
That's a great question. Haidt proposes that our moral intuitions are rooted in 6 foundational principles. Think of them like moral taste buds. We've got care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation, and liberty oppression.
Interesting. So are these foundations the same for everyone?
Well, while everyone possesses these moral foundations, they're not emphasized equally across individuals or cultures. This is where it gets really interesting, especially when we consider political differences.
How so? Do liberals and conservatives use these foundations differently?
Absolutely. Haidt's research suggests that liberals tend to prioritize care and fairness, focusing on individual rights and minimizing harm. They champion equality, fighting for the underdog, and protecting the vulnerable.
That makes sense. It aligns with their values of compassion and social justice.
Exactly. On the other hand, conservatives tend to draw on a wider range of foundations, giving more weight to things like loyalty, authority, and sanctity. They emphasize respect for traditions, strong families, and upholding moral order.
So they're both tapping into different aspects of what we value as humans. Are you saying both sides have valid points?
That's exactly what Haidt argues. He says that a healthy society actually needs both perspectives. It's like having 2 eyes, each providing a unique perspective, contributing to a more complete picture. But this also explains why we butt heads so often. We're literally seeing the world through different moral lenses.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. So, are you saying liberals and conservatives are just wired differently?
It's more nuanced than that. Haidt uses the term moral matrix to describe a person's unique blend of these moral intuitions. It's shaped by our genes, upbringing, culture, and life experiences. We all have our own moral matrix, but we need to understand that others have different ones too.
So, understanding these differences is key to having more productive conversations.
Right, exactly. It's not about converting someone to your side, but more about understanding where they're coming from and appreciating that their perspective might be just as valid as yours.
That's a great point. And something we could all use a little more of these days. It seems like there's a lot more to unpack here.
There is.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. You know, it's one thing to understand these moral foundations in theory, but how do they actually play out in our lives?
Right. That's where things get really fascinating. Let's talk about politics for a moment. Imagine a debate on universal health care.
Okay. A hot button issue for sure. How did these moral foundations come into play?
Well, someone arguing for universal health care from a liberal perspective might emphasize the care harm foundation. They might highlight the suffering of those who can't afford medical treatment and the moral imperative to help. They might also appeal to fairness cheating, arguing that everyone deserves access to health care, regardless of their income.
Right. They might say it's unfair that some people have access to life-saving treatment while others don't.
Exactly. Now, someone opposing universal health care from a conservative perspective might frame it differently. They might appeal to the Liberty Oppression Foundation, arguing that government-run health care restricts individual freedom and choice. They could also invoke the Authority Subversion Foundation, expressing concern about government overreach and potential bureaucratic inefficiencies.
So even though they're debating the same issue, they're using different moral languages.
Precisely. And that's why these conversations can get so heated. We're talking past each other, not realizing that we're starting from different moral premises.
This makes me think of those political arguments that just go in circles. Each side digs in deeper, and no one's mind changes.
Yeah. Haidt uses a brilliant analogy to illustrate this, the writer and the elephant. Imagine your mind as a writer on top of a giant elephant. The elephant represents our powerful, intuitive system, those gut feelings we talked about.
Okay, so the elephant is all about emotion and instinct.
Yeah.
And the writer?
The writer, representing our reasoning, tries to guide the elephant, but often ends up just rationalizing where the elephant already wants to go.
So we're not as rational as we think we are.
Exactly. Our reasoning often serves to justify our pre-existing intuitions, not to challenge them. Haidt even did a study where he presented liberals and conservatives with evidence that contradicted their own candidates' positions.
What happened? Did they change their minds?
Not really. Instead, their brains went into overdrive trying to rationalize the discrepancies and protect their existing beliefs. Their inner writer was scrambling to keep that elephant on course, even when faced with contradictory information.
So how do we break free from this? Is it even possible?
Well, Haidt argues that the first step is awareness. Recognize that we all have an elephant, those powerful intuitions, driving our moral judgments. We can't ignore them, but we can learn to work with them.
So, self-awareness is key. What else can we do?
One of the most powerful things we can do is engage in constructive dialogue with people who hold different views. And I don't mean trying to win a debate or convert someone. It's about listening, understanding, and finding common ground.
Easier said than done.
Right.
Especially when we feel so passionately about these issues.
Absolutely. But here's the key. Instead of just focusing on the facts and arguments, try to understand the underlying moral foundations that drive the other person's beliefs. Ask yourself, what do they value? What are their concerns? What makes this issue important to them?
So it's about trying to see the world through their moral lens, even if we don't fully agree with it?
Exactly. And when you do that, you might be surprised to find common values you didn't even realize you shared. Maybe you both value fairness, but have different ideas about what a fair society looks like. Or perhaps you both prioritize care, but direct that care towards different groups.
Okay, that makes sense. By understanding each other's moral foundations, we can start to build bridges instead of walls.
Exactly. And it's not about pretending that our differences don't exist. It's about recognizing that those differences can be valuable, even enriching.
I like that. But how does religion fit into all of this? We haven't talked much about that yet.
Well, Haidt argues that religion plays a fascinating role in shaping our moral landscape, especially when it comes to group behavior. He suggests that religion can be seen as a kind of hive switch.
A hive switch? What does that mean?
Think of a beehive. Individual bees work together for the good of the hive, often sacrificing their own needs for the sake of the collective.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Is he saying religion makes us more cooperative?
Exactly. He argues that religion taps into our innate capacity for self-transcendence and group bonding. It allows us to experience a sense of belonging to something bigger than ourselves.
And that feeling of belonging, that sense of shared identity, can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. It can motivate us to act altruistically, to cooperate with others, and to sacrifice for the good of the group. And Haidt doesn't just limit this to traditional religious settings. He sees this hive switch activated in other contexts, too.
Like what? What else can trigger this feeling of collective unity?
Think about those moments of awe and wonder you might experience at a concert, a sporting event, or even during a protest. These are situations where individual identities fade, and a sense of collective energy takes over.
I can definitely relate to that. There's a certain magic to those shared experiences.
Exactly. And Haidt argues that religion has been particularly effective at harnessing this human tendency for millennia. It's created rituals, symbols, and narratives that bind people together, fostering cooperation and a sense of shared purpose.
This is all incredibly insightful. It's really making me think differently about how our moral intuitions shape our world.
And that's exactly what Haidt hopes to achieve with the righteous mind. He wants us to understand that our moral differences, while often the source of conflict, can also be a source of strength and wisdom.
I'm starting to see that. But how do we move forward? How do we bridge these divides and create a more harmonious society? How do we bridge these divides and create a more harmonious society?
Right. Haidt doesn't offer any easy answers, but he does give us some powerful tools for thinking about this. One of the most important is the idea that moral diversity can actually be a good thing.
Wait, really? How can that be? It seems like these moral differences are what's tearing us apart.
Well, think back to those 6 moral foundations. Liberals, with their emphasis on care and fairness, they're often the ones pushing for social justice, fighting for the underdog, and protecting the vulnerable. Conservatives, drawing on foundations like loyalty, authority, and sanctity, often emphasize the importance of strong families, shared values, and social order.
Okay, so both sides are contributing something valuable to the conversation. But how do we make those different voices work together instead of against each other?
Haidt argues that the key is to shift our mindset. Instead of seeing the other side as the enemy, we need to start seeing them as a valuable partner. It's like having two eyes, each providing a different perspective that ultimately helps us see the world more clearly.
So, it's not about trying to convert someone to your side, but more about recognizing the wisdom in their perspective, even if you don't agree with everything they say.
Exactly. It's about understanding that our differences can actually make us stronger as a society. A society that only values care and fairness might neglect the importance of tradition and social cohesion. A society that overemphasizes authority and loyalty might stifle individual freedom and creativity. We need both.
That makes sense. But how do we actually put this into practice? It's easy to say we should be more understanding.
Yeah.
But how do we actually bridge those divides in our daily lives?
Well, Haidt suggests a few practical strategies. One of the most important is simply listening to each other. And I don't mean just waiting for your turn to speak. I mean really listening. Trying to understand the other person's perspective and where they're coming from.
That's so important. We often get caught up in our own heads, rehearsing our arguments, and not really paying attention to what the other person is saying.
Exactly. Another key is to focus on finding common ground. Instead of highlighting your differences, try to identify shared values and goals. Maybe you both care about protecting the environment, even if you disagree on the best way to do it. Or maybe you both value education, even if you have different ideas about how it should be funded.
So, it's about finding those points of connection, those shared values that can help us build bridges instead of walls.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about pretending that our differences don't exist. It's about recognizing that those differences can actually be valuable, even enriching.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind is more than just a book about politics and religion. It's a guide to understanding human nature, our own biases, and the complex tapestry of morality that shapes our world. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
It has. It's a must-read for anyone seeking to navigate our increasingly polarized world with greater understanding and empathy.
Couldn't agree more. If this conversation has sparked your curiosity, we highly encourage you to check out The Righteous Mind. You can find a link to purchase it in the description below.
And to keep those mind-expanding conversations going, be sure to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more insightful book analyses. Thought-provoking discussions. We'll see you next time.